we are breaking down region by region of the state. We split them into 21. We're going in alphabetical order. This week is the Big Country. So Raven gave us her thoughts on what the football aspect is in the 325 down there, or the greater 325 area. I'm sure they're not all 325. Actually, Llano is 325.
Oh, like nice.
My home phone number growing up was a 325 number. So let's get into it. There are 68 total teams that we put in the Big Country region. Of those 68 teams, 20 of them are ranked in our Dave Campbell's Texas Football and Associated Press preseason rankings. These are the official rankings of note for Texas high school football. We are very proud of that. You can see all of the extended rankings right here in our summer edition of Dave Campbell's Texas Football. Those, by the way, will be making their ways to shelves probably next week,
I think.
So if you're a subscriber, we'll send it to you this week. If you want to go to texasfootball.com/subscribe, we'll go ahead and put one in the mail so you can get them still before they come out on shelves. But they will be there if you're waiting until retail, hopefully next week. So excited for that. But 20 of those teams are ranked. That's a whopping 29.41% of teams in the Big Country are ranked in the preseason top 25.
That's wild.
That's outstanding. We talked about Austin having a shocking amount last week. This is even more, a higher percentage of teams ranked in the Big Country. Now, let's say these are not a big portion of this is all 2A, 1A. We are about to go headfirst into small school football here, but we have listed the 20 teams that are ranked in the Big Country, and we'll go ahead and start off with the largest classification out there, which is 5A Division 2. Abilene Cooper is ranked number 23 in 5A Division 2, and then the highly debated as to whether or not Stephenville is considered in the Big Country. And here's the deal. They might not be necessarily considered in the Big Country, but tell me where they are supposed to be. Because it's not the DFW. They're not in Central Texas. They're not in the Waco area. So realistically speaking, the Big Country is the region that they fit the best in.
Right.
So
they're going to be stuck somewhere.
They have to end up somewhere. Stephenville and Wichita Falls are the two different places across the state of Texas where it's like they're just kind of on an island. There's really nothing either way that you can realistically put them in, but just because they're on an island doesn't mean that they don't have one hell of a shot to go back to back this year. They are the defending 4A Division 1 state champions, the reigning state champs, and we think that they can run it again. She said it earlier, Sterling Doty, and what he has done with that program, a very it's a program that is no stranger to state championships. This was their 6th one that they claimed in 2021, but they are number 1 in 4A Division 1, and we'll see if they can go wire to wire there. Moving down into the 3A classifications, a team that we saw in the 2020 state championship, if you'll remember, number 5, Tuscaloosa Jim Ned coach Matt Fanning, and his squad is ranked number 5 in 3A Division 1 out there in the Big Country. They've been a staple out there for the past couple of years. Moving down into 3A Division 2, as Raven said, if you're going down to visit the number 15th ranked early Longhorn, stop at Underwood's Cafe in Brownwood. But then also we have number 23 in Eastland coming in. Now, here's where we get to the meat of the Big Country rankings. Let's go to 2A Division 1. You're going to have number 5 Hawley, the state runner-ups in 2A Division 1, losing to the Shiner Comanches in that state championship game last year. You go down to number 9, and it's Coleman, and then number 10, you have Cisco. Moving down into 2A Division 2, it is the number 1 team in 2A Division 2 in the Albany Lions. We won't go too far into this because we'll talk about Coach Denny Faith and his impressive squad down there in just a little bit, but you move on. At number 16 comes in at Santo, and then you have the Plowboys of Roscoe down there at number 24. The bulk of this, we actually had to split it into 2 different graphics because we did not have enough room to list all of the 6-man teams, and this is it. Big Country is the it's the Taj Mahal of six-man football. Now, when we get into further West Texas, whether you want to talk about the Panhandle or even further into actual West Texas, then yes, that's kind of the big hub, but the Big Country really is the meat and potatoes of six-man football, and it's easy to see because we'll go 1A Division 1 here. You have number 1 Westbrook, the reigning 1A Division 1 state champs, after they beat nonetheless number 3 in the May Tigers. They have been a staple program and one that we continue to see. Raven obviously saying, it's crazy to have 2 teams playing each other in the region that you cover in the state championship game. Then not far off from that, number 18, you have Hermley, and then number 19 following right up behind them is Gorman. Moving down now to the smallest UIL classification in 1A Division 1 six-man football. You have the Jaybirds of Jayton coming in at number 3. The Greyhounds of Strawn, the reigning 1A Division 2 state champs. We will talk about why they are number 5 here in just a bit. Number 8, you have Throckmorton. Number 14, you have Lorraine. And then one of my favorite named high school football teams here. You have number 18, Blanket. I love that. I love blankets. Blankets make me happy. So the team of Blanket makes me happy, and we are rooting for their success, and I will be biased, and y'all can judge me. So there you go. Those are the 20 ranked teams in our DCTF/Associated Press preseason rankings heading into the 2022 football season out of the 68 total teams that make up our Big Country region. So again, 29.41% is outstanding, and obviously the bulk of those being 2A and 1A.
Yeah, I remember last week we were like, I'll be shocked if we find a percentage like that in the rest of this series that we've got, and sure enough, the very next week we got one that beats it.
Episode 3 says, hey, you
hey guys.
Big dummies. So there you go. There are the ranked teams. Now we want to get into, let's talk players.
Yeah.
And we go over to our Cruton expert of vibes.
Yeah, that's quite the title.
I'm determined to give you something with vibes in the title. Like, I will not sleep until I figure out the best way to put that. But for now, we go to our Cruton expert of vibes, Mallory Hartley, to give us a little bit of players to watch here in the Big Country region.
Yeah, we got there's quite a bit of talent in the Big Country region. A couple of these guys playing small school, and you'll notice that a lot of these guys are going to be playing both ways too, because when you get down into the lower ranks of UIL, you'll see a lot of players that do play both ways because you just don't have that depth at the lower ranks. So we'll go ahead and throw the graphic up. First up, Abilene Wiley, wide receiver and defensive back Reese Burrow. Man, I think the Bulldogs are surely glad they have this guy coming back. He definitely played a key role on both sides of the ball for the Bulldogs, and definitely will be looking for his leadership on the field this year. I think he's a dual sport athlete too, so he plays baseball as well. But this guy is going to have a significant impact on the way that this Abilene Wiley team is going to turn out this year.
Yeah, he was our District 2 5A Division 2 offensive, our preseason offensive player of the year. So he makes an immediate impact. He's a kid that we've watched kind of come up through the ranks, and really he adds a good bit of senior leadership on this team as well. So it'd be very interested to see how he plays out, and definitely if you're a big school snob and you live in the Big Country, here's your guy to follow.
Yep. You can't talk about the Big Country without talking about Stephenville quarterback Ryder Lambert. We saw him last year. We saw him up close and personal at the state championship. We filmed our DCTF All Access piece, Stephenville versus Austin LBJ. His junior campaign, I'm just going to read it off to you. It's quite the stat sheet. You got
y'all ready for stats?
Yeah, listen to this. Passed for 4,275 yards, 52 touchdowns through the air. He went 249 of 384. And that's just in the air.
Yeah.
Let's go. Let's switch to the ground now. 117 carries for 831 yards and 11 scores. That's wild, man.
He was the guy.
He was the guy.
What's funny is actually he almost wasn't even the guy for them last year. We'll talk a lot more about Stephenville here coming up in a second, so I don't want to get too into this, but he did have outstanding wide receiver Coy Aiken, who realistically was the guy, but man, they made one hell of a pair, and he's back, and so there's some holes to fill. Again, we'll talk about that, but Ryder Lambert, if you're looking for the easy MVP of the Big Country in our minds, I think that all eyes point to him, and there's no reason that it shouldn't.
Up next, Holly wide receiver and defensive back Cason O'Shields. This dude, I mean, you saw him up close and personal, but this dude never left the field. And a lot of players, of course, like I said, played both ways when you get down to the lower ranks. But he averaged 150 yards per game and an interception a game.
Right, you know,
now, I'm not a math wizard here, but that sounds pretty dang good.
That's pretty darn good. And yeah, it's the one interception per game that really stood out to me because Holly's defense was absolutely outstanding. That was a juggernaut of a defense last year, and you could see it. I mean, I was able, yes, like you said, I was able to watch them. I was sidelining for their state championship game. That obviously was not the best showing that they had, but the week before that in the state semifinals, I watched their game against Marlin, and that was a Marlin team that we talked about the explosiveness of their offense every single week, and they just locked him down. I mean, he's a ball hawk down there in the secondary, and he's an impressive kid, and he's got really good size. When you get down to the 2A level, size plays a big factor into it, but he's got the speed, he's got the size. He is an incredibly impressive player, and the reason that Holly is ranked number 5 is because they still have that. He is the it guy there for the Bearcats.
Moving on down, Coleman wide receiver and defensive back Braxton Smith. Coleman's a team that likes to throw the ball, and they need reliable receivers to do so. Braxton Smith is that guy, and he doesn't have much trouble getting open and can create pretty much something out of completely nothing.
Right, and that's one of those things. Yeah, the Blue Cats, like you said, they like to go real spread. Yeah. They like to really try and get him open, and that's the thing is he's one of the guys that can win the one-on-one battle.
Yep.
And when you have that in the 2A level, it takes
makes
it to
a
the
difference.
next level.
Yep. Moving down, Albany offensive line Zane Wagner. I believe I pronounced that right. 6'3", 250 pounds. He's a tackle. Definitely anchors that offensive line, and I didn't see any stats on him, so I pulled up his huddle like usual, and one thing I noticed while watching is that he does a fantastic job of sticking with his blocks. Like, he'll take this guy, he'll shove him 20 yards and pull him down. It's nice. It's pretty
like
cool.
He's like pancake extraordinaire.
Yeah.
It's like the scene from The Blind Side when he takes the kid and he pushes him all the way like outside of the stadium, and it's like, where were you taking him? He was like, well, coach, I was taking him to the bus. It was time for him to go home. Like
that's him.
That's what you'll get out of Zane. He is a massive human. I was able to see him play the past 2 years, and it's insane. He looks like a man amongst boys.
The big enough gaps that he can create for his skill players. I mean, it's unreal.
It's an immovable force. I mean,
sure.
He's massive.
Last up on our list, Jane Jaybirds running back and defensive back Isaac King. I think the Jaybirds have turned into a pretty perennial powerhouse in the big country region. And really with the return of a massive offensive line that should free up space for Isaac King to find the end zone pretty often this year.
Yeah, that's the best thing about Jayton this year is they have every single offensive lineman returning, which is huge.
Yeah.
And that's what, well, again, as kind of Raven said, like line is kind of in quotes a little bit there because it is 6-man football. Yeah. But you're right in the fact that Jayton has the guy that they need right here in Isaac King, but they just find a way to win. Jayton just feels like that program that is waiting to get to the point where they can finally break through that threshold and make their way into the state championship game. They're always right there. They're always a competitor. And if I had to point down, and we even looked at Jayton last year and said, we think this team's a year early. I think they've got a lot of good returners and that they could really take that next step to finally be the powerhouse that they need to be to play at the highest level. And so I think that Jayton is right there on the cusp and that Isaac King is going to be a huge factor in that equation.
So there you go. Players to watch in the big country region. Of course, there's lots others that are going to make significant impacts for their schools, but those are just a couple that we wanted to highlight for the big country region.
And now we're going to go ahead and wrap this all up with a couple of storylines to follow. So the first one that we're going to hit is smallest classification, largest change-ups. We've talked a lot about 6-man football today, and the thing that not a lot of people realize about 6-man football is obviously, it is a very, very tight-knit community. If you're in it fully. And everyone knows everyone. That's kind of the name of the game. You can walk through Allen High School with 7,000 kids and say you can get to graduation and go, never even
seen that guy.
That is not the way that a 1A town works in any regards. So the largest change-up to come to 1A this year was definitely the movement over from Strawn. Now, Strawn is ranked number 5 in our preseason poll in 1A Division 2. They're the reigning state champion of 1A Division 2. Why are they ranked number 5? Well, they're not returning any starters. They do not have a single starter returning from that state champion team. Now, Coach Dwayne Lee is a mastermind when it comes to six-man football and will have absolutely no reason to doubt him or anything. And you might be looking at it and going, they don't have anyone coming back. Why in the world are they number 5? Well, when you're Strawn, when you're the Greyhounds, and you have a program builder like that, you get kids to buy in, and they're ready from the get-go to be level. Strong Greyhounds. Exactly.
Yeah, and when you talk about six-man football, I compare it a little bit to basketball. If you've got one player that can make a significant impact, that can change the entire dynamic of a team, you know?
Exactly, and we actually had Strawn as before our preseason polls came out, Strawn was higher than 5. They were much higher than 5. The reason that they bumped down to 5 is they were supposed to have one returning starter. And if you'll remember, it was going to be Grayson Rigden, the freshman that absolutely electrified the state championship game last year. He was offensive and defensive MVP as a freshman. His father was the offensive coordinator there at Strawn and took the head coaching job, and he is now at Benjamin. So Grayson then followed suit, and he is now at Benjamin. So watch out for Benjamin, because they have
they got Grayson Rigden.
easily, I would say, and I don't even think you can say arguably at this point, the best six-man player to be playing right now in the state of Texas. So that kind of dropped Strawn down a little bit. So it was crazy how, like you mentioned, when you have the literal guy in six-man football, it makes the world of difference. And that's why some people love six-man football, and that's why some people hate six-man football. And it's up to each their own. But it is crazy that one transfer can really make the world of difference when you're talking about that. So even though it is the smallest classification, there are the largest change up, and that really has been the big one heading into the 2022 season.
Yeah, because you're taking your best offensive and defensive star away.
Exactly.
You know, like that affects not that doesn't just affect the offense, that's going to affect the defense too.
110%. Moving on, the next storyline to follow here, we've talked about them a lot, but can the Yellow Jackets buzz to a repeat? Of course, we're talking.
Can I just point out the headline that you came up with? I think it's cute.
Oh, thank you.
Can the Yellow Jackets buzz to repeat? I just wanted to give you credit for that.
I get paid for the headlines, I guess.
You do.
But, so can they buzz to a repeat? Obviously, we've talked a lot about Stephenville today, and whether you want to consider them in the big country or not, well, we're going to, because that's what our region breakdown says. Stephenville is acceptable. We told you about the quarterback earlier in Ryder Lambert. He is a superstar, plain and simple. He leads that team. He is a good leader on and off the field. An impressive arm on the kid. He will absolutely be going to play college ball at the next level. But here's the difference. They lost the other guy in Coy Aiken. You'll remember he had the play that I think he was most known for in the state championship game was when Austin LBJ had an interception right about the 10-yard line. Stephenville was driving down, about to score. Austin LBJ had an interception. Coy then followed him back and punched the ball out into the arms of another Stephenville player, which they then ran back for, at that point, a pick six, if you want to call it that. So a player that is unbelievably well aware. He is playing now at Texas Tech University. But it'll be very interesting to see if Stephenville can do that. The thing that I loved most about Stephenville last year that I felt like went completely underrated was their defense. We talked so much about Ryder Lambert. We talked so much about Coy Aiken and all the other unbelievable players they had on the offensive side. When Stephenville gets off the bus, you look at that defense and you say, those look like a bunch of average Joes. And they work so well as a unit. They have an unbelievable staff that puts together that defense and turns a lot of good athletes into a great unit.
Yeah.
Stephenville has a lot of people coming back. They have 26 returning lettermen coming back.
Right.
They are ranked number 1 for a reason. They're poised to make it. They have the guy on offense. If they can figure out how he's going to distribute the ball, I don't think that there's any way that Stephenville can't run it back.
No, they're returning 2 incredibly talented edge rushers in Jack Barkley and Camden McKinney. So when you can dominate in the trenches like that, you're pretty set to go on defense.
Absolutely. And, too, this is a battle-tested team. You were talking about what they schedule in their non-district games. That's really impressive. And last year, if you'll remember, on their way to the state championship, they went through Paris, Melissa, Argyle. I mean, they do not back down to anyone. And you look, and then, I mean, on top of that, they added Wichita Falls Hershey that was on an unbelievable hot streak. And then Austin LBJ, they stopped them in the title game.
Yeah.
So they're battle tested. And you look at all of Region 2 right now and you go, who do they have to really get through other than the people in their district? This district, if you haven't been paying attention to District 5 4A Division 1, now's the time to do it, because on top of Stephenville, there's China Spring. May have heard of them. Reigning 4A Division 2 state champs. They moved up to 4A Division 1. They ended up with district bunkmate Stephenville. And on top of that, you've got Don Hyde's squad at Waco La Vega, a consistent contender. Yeah. So you look at that, but you take a look at the greater scope of Region 2, and you've got Salina and Paris. They're used to seeing those teams. So I genuinely think that when you talk about District 5, what you're going to be looking at is whoever can win that district is in the best shape. Because the other two are
going through a gauntlet of a freaking
Absolutely. The other two,
district.
You can assume that China Spring and Waco La Vega will end up playing each other in, if Stephenville finished first in that district, then you're looking at Waco La Vega and China Spring probably playing each other in the regional semis, and then they have to turn around and what we would assume play Stephenville in the regional finals.
Right.
After that, they make it to the state semis, and Region 1 is a lot weaker of a region right now. Whoever wins that district is going to have the easiest of paths getting to that regional final game, because if not, the other two are likely going to end up playing each other again.
Right.
So if you're not keeping an eye on District 5 4A Division 1, man, that's the power nexus district right there.
Well, and when you see teams that have a tough district schedule like that, some of them tend to schedule their non-district schedule pretty lightly, you know. But if you're Stephenville, you're not going to do that. I wanted to point out real quick before we move on, they scheduled 2 scrimmages, just scrimmages at the beginning of the season, both 5A teams. They start off with Glen Rose, then they move on to Aledo for just scrimmages. When you get into that first non-district game that actually counts, you're playing Midlothian Heritage, and then, shout out Matt Stepp, Everman, week 1 and 2. All 5A teams. That's ridiculous.
That is,
That's wild. Right, hey, if you want to be the best, you got to beat the best,
you gotta beat the best.
So that's a team that you're going to want to pay attention to throughout the entire season.
Absolutely. And then moving on to our final storyline to follow here when you're taking a look at the Big Country region, and let's dial it back down to 2A. Is this the year for Coach Denny Faith? Denny Faith, if you do not know, is entering his 36th year as the head coach for the Albany Lions. I think he's now the longest tenured coach at one school now that Phil Danaher has retired. So he's going, he has 330 wins right now. This is the year, because while he's been there for 36 years, while he has 330 wins, and he ranks second right now amongst active coaches in Texas high school football with those 330 wins. He can probably nuzzle, if they have a good season this year, he can nuzzle his way into the top 5 all time. He is beloved. He has consistently produced great teams. The one area that's missing, he's been to the state championship game 4 times, but he's lost all four times. So in 91, they lost to Schulenburg. In 09, they lost to Cayuga. In 2014 and 2015, they went back-to-back and lost to Bremond both times.
And last year, they made it to the state semis and lost to eventual state champion Stratford.
Exactly. So we almost can compare this to seeing this play out with Ray Biles last year from Lorena. If you'll remember the 3A Division 1 state champs last year, Ray Biles has been at Lorena this was his 30th season, and the one thing he was missing was that state championship. So you have to think that Coach Denny Faith is trying to get one before he decides to call it quits. And I've met Denny Faith before. I have had conversations with him. He might just stay there forever. He loves the game of football. He loves 2A football. He loves that. So I'm not saying that just if they do win this year that he would call it quits, but after 36 seasons as the head coach at one school, you can assume that if he was to finally grab the one last checkbox that he needs in winning a UIL state Texas High School Football State Championship, that he would do that. And they're our number 1 team right now in 2A Division 2. They've got 6 returning starters on both sides of the ball, and this is an Albany team that we are incredibly, incredibly high on. You look at Region 2 for 2A Division 2, and you'll see it's just, man, that's a powerful region down there in 2A Division 2, because you have the same people that they run into every single year. Wink coming out of District 5 there, Albany's in District 6, but then it's the 2 giants that are the ones that have continuously caused issues for Coach Denny Faith and his squad in Windthorst and Munster. Windthorst is in District 7, Munster is in District 8, and those are kind of the things glaring them in the eye. When you look at their district, it's really, they shouldn't have any issues making it through that. Early on in the playoffs, they shouldn't have anything. If they can get to AT&T Stadium, I really think that this might be the year for Coach Denny Faith to finally grab that state championship with Albany. I think that they have always, we brought them up earlier, they always have a lot of size on their line that goes a long way. Now they have skill players that they can utilize to complement that line. So they have the pieces there in the trenches that they need. If they can find those skill players, Samuel Rosas and London Fruentes, they're the 2 big wide receivers that they had. They also have Cole Chapman, their quarterback, which is exactly the piece that they needed to fill. So they might open it up a little bit more. A lot of times they're a hard-hitting team, so it'll be very interesting. But I think if there is a year that Coach Denny Faith can do before he ends up inevitably calling retirement, I think that this could be the year for the Lions.
Yeah.